Hello everybody and welcome to Victoria Sponge Week. So this is a great recipe to adapt further down the line. So if you can master a good vanilla sponge, which is what this is, then you can change the toppings, you can change the flavourings, change the size of tin, make it into cupcakes. So this is a really good one to get your head around, and let's get started really. So I have pre-weighed all of my ingredients. As I've said before, this is the way I like to work because it means now I don't have to think about weighing things out. It's all ready and we just get mixing. So the first thing I have done is put my oven on. If you see me glancing down here, it's because I'm following the same recipe as I've uploaded for you. So this makes sure I'm doing things in exactly the same order. So just excuse me if I'm looking over there quite a bit. So I put my oven on and I've made a water bath. So this is an old tin that I don't really use. I've put a centimetre or two of water in the bottom, and that's going to go just in the bottom of my oven whilst it's warming up, so it starts to create steam. And the steam adds moisture to your cake and it makes a real difference. So I'll just do that now. There we go. So my oven temperature is set as per the recipe, which in my electric fan oven needs to be 140. Now that's on the cool side compared to some recipes, but what you don't want, especially with gluten-free in my experience, is to cook it too quickly so it gets harder and drier on the outside before it's really had a chance to cook in the middle. The steam from the water bath will help it not dry out. So the fact it's in the oven for longer than you may have baked before is okay. However, if you find that it really needs a lot longer than that, like an hour and 20, an hour and 30, the next time you bake, maybe put it up by 10 degrees or the equivalent. Ovens do vary. It's like driving a car, I suppose. No two are exactly the same. And it's about learning how yours behaves. And you'll get to know that as you go along. So we're going to start mixing now. I've got my stand mixer here ready and I've weighed out my margarine. I like to use Stork, but wherever you are in the world, whatever shops you like to go to, look for something that's for baking. A lot of them say great for baking, best for baking, slightly different mixes. My only warning would be that the very cheap ones, so some of the supermarket budget range, have a higher water content, and my feeling on that is that it can affect the rise of your cake. So a bit like the flour, try several, see what works for you. So I've weighed out, there we go, my 300 grams of margarine, and here I have 300 grams of caster sugar. Now, my Victoria sponge, I like to add some vanilla. Now, you may not do this with other recipes, but when you're baking gluten-free, I think you have to try and pack in as much flavour as you can. So not too much. I don't generally measure it, but I've given you a guide in the recipe. I'll just pop a bit in there and we'll beat that together to make it all creamy and fluffy. So that's been going for about 30 seconds and I've just stopped it to scrape around the bowl and make sure there are no lumps that are not getting mixed in, and then we go again. So So again, scrape the mixture off the paddle or the mixer or whatever it is you're using. As I said in other videos, you don't have to have a big, expensive, all singing, all dancing mixer like this one. You can have a little hand mixer. You can do it by hand. Use a wooden spoon, makes your arm ache a bit, but it's possible. You don't have to start with lots of expensive purchases. So, excuse me. This now has gone fluffier and lighter, and that's called creaming. So it's all together and nice and light. Next, what we're going to do is alternately add eggs and the dry ingredients. If you do it all in one go, you get lumps, and also this gives an opportunity to beat lots of air in, which is really important with a gluten-free sponge. So I've done 5 of the 6 eggs in this bowl, and we'll just do the 6th one. All I do is use a separate bowl rather than put them straight in here, because if you get a lump of shell, it's a lot easier to see and remove. And actually, I'll give you a tip for removing eggshells. So if you had a bit of shell in here, use half an eggshell with its nice sharp edges and use that to scoop out the rogue bit of shell that's got in your egg. And it sort of cuts the egg white that tends to be quite long and slimy and helps you scoop it out easily. So there you go. So all I'm doing here is breaking up the eggs. They don't need to be whisked particularly, but you don't want lumps of white and lumps of yellow. So that's quite an even consistency now. So I've got the flour here. I'm just going to add the psyllium husk into the flour. And I've said half a heaped teaspoon. Now it's not critical, but what I mean is don't be shy. So a flat half a teaspoon is probably not quite enough. So what I mean is, you know, something maybe like that. It's not a whole teaspoon, but it's a generous half. Let's call it that. So I'm going to put some of the egg. That's about a third, and about a third of the dry ingredients in, and give it a mix. So it's an even texture, but it's not over mixed at this stage. You just want to incorporate everything a bit at a time. So I'll do the same again. Some egg, dry ingredients, and mix again. At this stage, I'm just going to scrape around the bowl again, tend to get a sort of drier line around the top, and that just means it all gets mixed in nicely. I'm going to add the final third of the egg and the rest of the dry ingredients. That's the flour and the psyllium husk. Now today I'm using this flour. This is Asda's own brand from their Free From range. I like the Doves Farm, it's now called Free, and I like the Asda one. Both of them seem to produce really good results for me, and it's a case of experimenting again to see which one you like the taste of. I can't really tell the difference between those two, so I just buy whatever's available when I go to the supermarket. So I'm just going to mix this final amount of flour and egg into the rest of the mixture. Oops. So one last scrape to make sure there are no big lumps of flour missed. this is what it looks like now. It's nearly ready, but you really need to get lots of air in there. It gives the psyllium husk chance to sort of disperse, that's the word I'm looking for, throughout the mixture, start to sort of, it swells a little bit to do that gluey thing that it does, and we get lots of air in. So that is ready. We need to line the tin. This is my 8-inch diameter tin. I invested in some PME brand, which are quite hardy because I use them multiple times in the week. If you're just starting out, nip to your local supermarket and buy whatever they've got. Some of my favourite tins have been going for years, and they're cheap ones I bought from Morrison's or Asda about 10 years ago, and they were £3 or £4 each, so you don't have to go all out. One thing I would say is make sure they've got straight sides. Some of them are designed for pies and things, but you need the straight sides. So with a scrap of greaseproof paper, I'm just going to take a bit of the margarine and grease the tin. Now, it doesn't have to be immaculately done because you're going to line it, but you need the lining to stick to the tin. So I've just sort of wiped it around. Earlier on, I cut out a circle of greaseproof that's slightly bigger than the tin, so I just drew around it, and that means when you pop it in the bottom, it just comes up the sides ever so slightly, and you don't want a gap to let the cake mixture touch the tin because it'll catch or stick. Then I cut a long strip that's big enough to go all the way round inside. It's a bit fiddly, but this is why you need to grease it so it sticks as you go. Just smooth it. It's a bit long actually, so just rip a bit off. Where's that piece of paper gone? There it is. And I'll just add a bit more on there. So that is all stuck together. These out the way. So we've got the cake mix. Now let me show you the consistency. You may notice with gluten-free baking that I use more egg than you maybe would in normal baking. It adds fluffiness, it adds flavour, it helps it rise, and this is how it looks. So it's quite floppy, I suppose. It should drop off your spatula or your spoon, and this is going to go in the tin. I like to use a plastic sort of rubbery spatula because then you don't really waste any. You can just use a spoon. So I'm spreading this out. Now, if your tin is not quite 8 inches diameter, you might need to remove a little bit of the mixture. So you might be able to see this is just over half full. If it's too full, it won't rise and bake in the middle before it burns on the outside. So at this stage, just have a look. And if it's really quite near the top, take a couple of spoonfuls out. Tins come with accurate measurements. So think about how close to the 8-inch diameter your tin is. If you've got any questions about diameters, about tin proportions, just put a question in the Facebook group and I can work mixture quantities out for you according to what you've got. So if you've got a 7-inch tin, don't necessarily go and buy an 8-inch just to try this. Let's work out how much mixture you need and try it in your 7-inch tin. I'm all for being flexible and not spending a lot at the beginning, because you really don't need to. So this now is going to go in my oven. Now in my oven it takes an hour. The most important thing probably is that you understand how to tell it's baked through. And if you've baked lots of times before, you'll know exactly what to do. But basically, I would say after 55 minutes or an hour, take it out of the oven, test the middle with a cocktail stick or a wooden barbecue skewer or one of those metal cake testers if you've got one. Try not to put a big knife in the middle because it might deflate a bit, but a sharp knife, if a knife is all you've got, that's absolutely fine. When you draw it out, have a look, and it should be clean. You'll see a bit of steam, you might see a few crumbs, but it shouldn't be sticky. If it's gooey, it's definitely not done. So keep putting it back in the oven for 5 minutes at a time until it's done. And within an hour, hour 10, it should be cooked in the middle. And as I said earlier, if it's longer than that, next time think about upping the oven temperature slightly. But again, just put a question in the Facebook group. I'm here to help you work out how it's going to work best in your oven, so that you can go on to repeat it successfully over and over again. So I'm going to put this in the oven now, and we'll have a look at it in an hour. So I talk a lot about freezing bakes, and for me, freezing portions or even whole cakes has really helped with the fact that I'm the only gluten-free person in our household. So there were many times when I'd make a cake that everyone could share and I couldn't have any. So I'd end up having maybe some biscuits from the supermarket, gluten-free, free from aisle type stuff. And it's sort of grated a bit. It's quite hard. If you're gluten-free, you'll know what I mean. And if somebody you know is gluten-free, they'll certainly be able to tell you about it. So as well as developing recipes that everyone can enjoy together, and I promise you, even if people you serve this to don't have to eat gluten-free, they're not going to take one bite and turn it down. So that's one strategy really, is finding things that everyone enjoys together that are gluten-free. But sometimes you just need something to hand. So if a friend comes round with a lovely cake or a box of donuts and you can't have any, you've got something that you can have. So last week I made a gluten-free sponge cake just for me, really. It was a bit of a treat. I had some eggs I needed to use up. And what I did, I cut it up, ate quite a big piece, but then I froze the rest. And I want to show you what I did with it and how it looks now it's in the freezer, and what I do if I need a piece, say now with my cup of coffee this morning. So I'm going to unwrap it. It's got 2 layers of foil, no fancy tubs needed. You can use a tub, but all I did, I put it on my cake tin lid and I cut it up. I didn't eat all that in one go, by the way. This is all portioned, and what I would do now, I would just loosen a piece off. They do stick together a bit, but they're all right. Pop a piece on a plate. So at the moment, this is solid, but it's got the jam in it. It's perfectly fine. It is just as good as the day it went in the freezer. I'm going to wrap this back up. That can go back in the freezer for another time. Now, I'm going to put this in the microwave on defrost for about a minute, see how it feels, and then a little bit more if it needs it, and I'll be back in a second. So here it is. It looks, and I promise you it tastes just as good as the day you made it. This took me 2 and a bit minutes on a gentle defrost. You don't want to cook it. It's already cooked. Look, it's soft, still really spongy, and I'm actually going to eat this with my cup of tea. So this has just come out of the oven. I'm just going to test to see that it is cooked. You use a cocktail stick or something similar, push it into the middle, and it should come out nice and clean. maybe with the odd crumb on it, but certainly no raw gunky cake mix. So I'm just going to tip it out now. Be brave, you won't hurt it. There we are. Oh. Keep the paper on it. Just turn it the other way. There we are. So I'm going to just leave that now to cool. When it's nearly cold, I'm going to wrap it in foil just to trap the last tiny bit of steam inside to save that moisture, but not too early because you don't want it soggy. Once your cake is completely cold, you can unwrap it and get ready to fill it and decorate it as you wish. So I'm going to take off the foil and the paper, and I'm going to just pop it on the worktop. Now, I've got one of these cake levelers, I think it's called. It's got a wire that you can adjust to cut your cake at the point that you want to. You can, of course, just do it with a bread knife or a big knife. So we want this to be about halfway up. Let's just have a look. Make sure it's even. So that seam. That's about halfway, and you literally just put it through. So now we can have a bit of fun with it. So there are lots of different things you could do, and I'll tell you about these in a second. So first of all, I'm going to remove the top of the cake, and then we're going to put the bottom on. Now I've got a cake stand, you can use a plate, whatever you like really. Right, I'll just get some decorations ready. Just putting one half on a cake stand, cake plate, whatever you want to call it, the other half ready for when we need it. Now, the first thing to do is put some jam in the middle. That's what I'm going to do this time. Just a jar of jam, whichever you like. I like seedless raspberry. Now you want a good amount, but you don't really want it running down the sides. So just spread it around, nothing tricky, just, there we go. Quite a nice covering. And then we'll take the top and pop it back on. There we are. So just get, I've got an icing sugar sprinkler. You could just cover it in icing sugar, and there you are, tea time treat all done. Or there are other things you could do with it. So I made some buttercream whilst it was in the oven, and this is 50 grams of unsalted butter, softened in the microwave a bit, and 100 grams of icing sugar, little bit of vanilla flavouring extract, whatever you used in the cake. I'm just mixing it now to loosen it back up again. Tiny bit of water if you need it. It needs to be spreadable, but not runny. So at the moment, you can see that's possibly a little bit thick to spread. So I'm just going to pop that in the microwave for a few seconds. Otherwise, we'll end up spoiling the top of the cake because it won't spread. That is literally 2 or 3 seconds, and that's much better. Look, literally 2 or 3 seconds. So what we can do, imagine it's somebody's birthday. You could just, you see, so spread the buttercream on the top. Doesn't have to be pretty. Well, of course it'd be pretty. It doesn't have to be complicated. That's what I'm trying to say. There we are. Some sprinkles, anything. Oops, I need a spoon. Sprinkles sprinkles, any cake decorating supplier or supermarket, they're really not very expensive. Sprinkle them all over the top. There we are. Some candles and oops, a happy birthday topper, except I've just broken the Y off by getting it stuck under my cooling rack, but you get the idea. So there we are. There is a very lovely happy birthday cake for somebody who's gluten-free, and really you could serve this to everybody and see who doesn't realize it's gluten-free. So that's it really. Any questions, ideas for other toppings and fillings, pop them in the Facebook group, and I cannot wait to see your version.